I've long been a fan of building not just effects, but pieces of effects that I can put together and build up a larger effect out of the sum of a bunch of smaller circuits. Like I have this, which is a amplifier and a splitter that I can route 4 different audio paths, and at the other end of that, I can take 4 different audio paths, mix them down, and set an output level. I have this looper or bypass effect that I can take a dry signal, route it to something to test out the signal, and then have it go out to an amplifier. But all of these things kind of lack one thing in particular, and in my recent builds with the Everdead dead battery simulator, I needed something that I could mute the signal temporarily while I changed things around, put in a new Everdead device to test, and I'm listening to the amp and the guitar buzz the entire time. It's not very pleasant. I wanted some way that I could just mute the output going to the amp, change things around, and then turn it back on. So this is a simple, or at least this will be a simple mute device once I get everything in here. And I thought this would be a good opportunity to go over what it takes to make an effective loop or true bypass device that any guitar pedal could benefit from. Setting up a true bypass switch using a 3-pole double throw, we have these 9 pins. Now the center pins are the common input or output from the switch. I can either be in this upper or lower connection. And for a looper or for a effect send and return like this box, I have my input signal coming in and I have my output over here. So when I'm in bypass mode, my input signal is going to come in. I'm going to be connected to this lower lug here. I'm going to bridge that connection to the output switch, and then the output's going to go out through the output. Now for whatever effect that I've got up here, in the case of the looper, it's some external device, but in an effect, this is going to be enclosed in the enclosure with the switch. So this is going to be what I call the effects in, and after it's affected, I have my effects out. So when I'm in the effect position of the switch, the input comes in, comes up here to my effects in, it gets affected, and then on the output side to the effects out, then it gets routed to the output there. Now these other 3 tabs are for what we normally use for an LED indicator. So there's a number of different ways that I can route this in here. Usually I'll have whatever the positive power supply is, I'll run that through a resistor to that tab, and then I'll route that through the LED and go to ground. So when I'm in the effect position, I'll have some current come through this resistor. It will bridge across to this tab and then go through the LED and to ground. So that will come on when the effect is active. Now, mute is a little bit different. For mute, I'm only using, at the moment, I'm using the same kind of switch, but I'm only going to use 2 rows of these tabs for right now. I might add an LED at some future time. But for mute, what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus on when I'm in the active state. That is when I've got audio coming in, I don't want it to be muted, I want it to come out. That's going to represent my signal coming into the switch from the input, jumping across this connection, and then getting routed to the output. Now, when I'm in the mute state, I want to accomplish a few things. For one, I want the input, I want that to see some input impedance. So whatever's coming into here, I don't want it just to float around and be an antenna. I want that to go through like a 1 meg resistor and then have that go to ground. And this output path, I want that to be pulled down to ground so that connection is silent. So it's a really simple switching mechanism, but it accomplishes those two things. It gives whatever signal is coming into here, it gives it this input impedance, so it's not just floating around being an antenna, and the output path is being pulled down to ground, so whatever follows this is going to be silent. And when the mute is in the off state, this allows the input path to go straight through to the output unimpeded. So there's not going to be any kind of signal loss or anything like that. This is just a hardwire connection going through. I need to drill this guy and put in my few components, and I can get this thing wired up. All right, so that's all the components I need for the mute. This is going to be my input, so that's going to come off of here and go to this center tab. Then I'll need to bridge that, and then the output will go to this guy here. And in the mute position, I'll need to add a 1 meg ohm resistor, and also return the path to ground. All right, let's get that hooked up. All right, for the straight through path, I essentially need to make a staple. Just this bent piece of wire is what the signal is going to go through. Make sure that that's not shorting out. All right, so now I got to take care of the mute path. All right, so for my mute path, I need this to go through. It's not going to quite clear. All right, so I need to, I'm going to go ahead and tack in a resistor on the input side. So when I'm in the mute position, my input is going to come in through here. It's going to go and go through this 1 meg resistor off to ground. And this guy, I'm going to have a ground wire come from here over to here. So from the input side, I come in 1 meg to ground. And that same lug is ground for this output side. When it's muted, it goes to that ground terminal as well. So I can stick this guy in here, solder those connections in. So this guy needs to be around. So that's it. That should take care of the mute function that I'm after. The only thing this pedal really could use to make it more useful is to add an LED in here. But in order to do that, I'm going to have to add a power input and run power down to the switch, and then through a resistor and through the LED, and then ultimately back to ground. I can do that, but right now I'm just interested in something quick, dirty, and serviceable so I can test these other gizmos that I'm building in the meantime. And I may choose to come back and add a indicator to this later, because nothing is more frustrating than having an off switch for your entire rig. And you know, in the heat of the moment, you may wonder, why is nothing coming out? Something must be broken. Well, no, just the mute switch is on. So I'm setting myself up for a frustrating troubleshooting session later. But for the testing that I want to do and move forward with, this is going to work just fine. Let's hook it up to the rig and give it a test and make sure that it's working. All right, here we are at the main rig. There's my mute switch. That's my output. It's definitely going to be the last position in the pedal board. I got a short to fix. Cool. That's an easy fix. All right, so what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to back this guy back out and let that go up a little bit more. These are touching the inside of that bottom cap that goes on there. All right, just a quick fix. All right, so the button is a little bit more proud sticking out at the top of the enclosure now, but you can see how I've really recessed that in there, so there won't be any danger of that shorting out. All right, let's try this again. All right, now I think the issue is that positive lead on either or both of those is touching the bottom cover when I've got it on there, so it's grounding there or there. All right, well, that's an easy problem to fix too. I just need to shift these things around in those holes there. All right, so what I did is I took some pliers and just spun that around ever so slightly, so that's not sticking up quite so far. And same thing with this side. Turned it a little bit clockwise there so the positive lead wouldn't accidentally ground out on this bottom. All right, let's try that. Now I can fiddle with stuff, change things around. All right, so there it is. A quick utility pedal to mute the output so I can mess around with things on the pedal board and then turn everything back on and start playing again. It's not for everybody, but it is a valuable lesson in proper grounding technique and how to maintain your input impedance even when you're muted, and how to properly ground an output signal. All right, hope this helps, and I will catch you guys later. One more thing, I want to show you guys this tool. This is something I picked up at a thrift store years ago, and it's a screwdriver that you just have to push it in and it ratchets to drive the screw in. It's definitely not something I intend to use a lot, but it's nice to be able to just drive a couple of these screws in real quick into this enclosure instead of having to either get the drill driver or to use a manual screwdriver. Anyway, cool. Catch you guys later.